Um, Welcome, everyone. Kim Miles has an awesome interactive presentation set for us today, all about mindset traps and triggers. Kim helps executives tackle external leadership and internal mindset challenges so they can achieve their personal and organizational goals. Before we got started this morning, we were actually going through all sorts of different mindset traps and triggers that I personally have struggled with just over the past 24 to 48 hours. So it's a really good thing that I am getting to co-host this one with Kim, because just like, and hopefully you guys are the same, I think we all struggle with these things. They enter our lives both personally and professionally so much. So this is going to be a really impactful and important presentation. It's an honor for me to turn things over to Kim Miles.
Thank you so much, Kate. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to be part of RISE. I'm thrilled to be here today on this Monday morning. And today we are going to have, like Kate said, a very interactive program. So we're going to start off by learning a little bit about emotional intelligence, and we'll talk through and identify our emotional triggers as well as the mindset traps that we get in once we are triggered. Then we'll learn a few techniques as well as brainstorm some techniques that have worked for each of you. So my intent is for you to walk away with not only some better understanding of what are your traps and triggers, but then also some actual solutions that you can apply. When we talk about emotional intelligence, and it's framed EQ, there's a wonderful book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And this book is a very easy read. It's something that you really just read the first few pages, you take an assessment, and then the last several pages are different ideas and ways that you can improve your emotional intelligence. And the author is named Travis Bradbury and Jean Greaves. And actually, Travis Bradbury did a great video. So I'm going to go ahead and show this video.
We owe our understanding of emotional intelligence largely to a gentleman by the name of Howard Gardner. He's a Harvard psychologist. And he started his career at a time when people took the meaning behind a joke, a very old joke, far too seriously. And that joke is, what do kids call the nerds once they grow up? Anybody heard this? Right, they call them boss. And the people really believed the meaning behind this joke, and that is that IQ wasn't just the most important determinant of success in life, it was the sole determinant of success in life. It's all that mattered. So picture Gardner. He's a guy here in the 1950s, 1960s, was just finished his PhD, was starting his career, trying to decide how he's going to make a name for himself, put a stake in the ground and conduct research. And study after study came across his desk that showed that IQ predicted just 20% of how people do in life. And people of average IQs outperform those with the highest IQs 70% of the time. So here's Gardner saying, we're wrong. We really don't understand what makes people succeed in life. I want to understand this other 80% of success. And he was the first to propose this idea of multiple intelligences, with emotional intelligence being one of the largest skill sets that encompass what makes people successful. Here's how this works. Everything that we experience in the world around us enters at the base of the brain. So if the signals of the sound of me speaking traveling into your ear have to go to the base of your brain. If someone bumps into you and you feel that, it has to go to the base of your brain, and it travels across your brain through the limbic system. This means the limbic system is where emotions are generated. This means that you have 27 emotional experiences every waking hour. That's about 400 emotional experiences every single day. This is important because you have this emotional experience before the signals travel to the rational area of your brain. So you have an emotional reaction to events before you have a rational reaction to them. Emotional intelligence combines the two. It's your ability to respond with reason to to these emotional reactions that your body is naturally having. This is an evolutionary artifact that's really long ago was a survival mechanism. If a saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the bushes, having a quick emotional reaction is a very good thing because you're going to turn and run. When a colleague sends you a curt email or says something you don't like in a meeting and you have a quick emotional reaction, that's probably not going to do good things for you. So emotional intelligence is the mastery of that, the flow of information between these two areas in the brain.
Essentially, what Travis Bradbury is talking about is that emotional intelligence really is something that happens in the brain. It's not just something that is emotion-based, that it's actually brain-based. And so when information comes in, it starts at the base of the brain, which is the emotion center, before it gets to the logic part of the brain, which is the frontal lobe. And so it's important to understand that, because if everything comes through the filter of the emotions before it hits the logic, that explains why we get triggered. And as we navigate today, one of the most important things to recognize is that we are going to get triggered. The question is, what trap do we fall into after that? And how do we navigate that? So that's what emotional intelligence is really about, and this presentation is about, because I want for each of you to feel very empowered, no matter what the situation is. If it's your 2-year-old who is triggering you, the worst thing is for someone to feel disempowered, because that feeling is the trap. That feeling is the thing that keeps us stuck, that makes us behave, think, believe in ways that doesn't allow us to move forward, doesn't allow us to use our personal power to ultimately achieve what we want, which is better relationships, a more successful business, more sales, etc. So right here is a summary of what is in the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book. And there are 4 different topics that is covered in the book. And when you think about it, these 4 topics are critical to how we navigate life. The first one is self-awareness, and it's understanding what's going on with yourself. And then self-management. How do we manage what's going on with ourselves, the stress, the anxiety, etc. The social awareness is about what is happening in the world around us, and how does that trigger us and create the way in which we engage with the world. And then finally, relationship management, which truly is about how are we managing ourselves and social situations so that we can have the kind of relationships we want. This is a quick summary, and I'm happy to send this slide deck out as soon as we're done so that you can look at this. Again, the book is fantastic. I think it's something like $15 on Amazon, and it comes with a little code so that you can take the assessment, and then it gives you strategies. But we're going to talk through some strategies today. So what I'd like for you to do is to just take a couple minutes, grab your pen and your paper, and I'd like for you to write down what are your emotional triggers. And when I say trigger, these are things that irritate, upset, put you over the edge. And I'll give you just a couple quick examples. First one is you're driving in traffic and someone cuts you off. That's the triggering event. So that would be something. If somebody is rude or curt when you're in a networking event, that could be a triggering event or a triggering emotion. If you are in a sales conversation and somebody asks you, so what is the price? Before you even get to talk to them about the value, that could be a trigger. So let's go ahead and just take 2 minutes to write down as many triggers as you can, triggers for yourself. Because we're going to take that information when we break out, and you're going to talk through what are some of the triggers that then ultimately lead you to a trap.
Kim, is there like an average number that like is healthy for triggers, or can I just keep writing? Or I'm kind of kidding. But
yeah, you just keep writing, because I mean, I truly believe that as we navigate through life, the number of triggers increases. Even though we may figure out how to avoid the traps, we still can get triggered by it. We still are going to, even at the very base level, for instance, when you're a little kid and someone takes your toy, then that's a triggering event. As an adult, and this is interesting because I learned this a long time ago, the very animal instincts of possession and ownership, like, they don't go away. So, and I was talking with you about this, Melanie, it's fascinating that in the wild, you see animals that will mark their territory. They'll go around peeing on things to mark what's theirs. And human beings do the same. Thankfully, we have evolved a bit and we're not peeing on things, but we do, and you will see people who walk down the halls and they'll touch the wall. And that, at the very core, basic animal instinct is a form of marking territory or taking ownership of, like, this is my space as I walk down the hall. So, and I actually tested this a long time ago. I walked into a man's office and he had all his little toys or whatever on his desk that were for show, but they were with arm's reach. And I reached out and grabbed one of the little squishy balls, and he had a trigger with that because I was touching his stuff. Now, he was mature enough, he was evolved enough that he didn't bite me or act with any kind of animal instinct, but the trigger is still there. So the triggers are still going to be there. The question is, how do we avoid the traps? So let's go ahead and think about when you were making your list. If you were to do a deeper dive within yourself, what are the origins of these triggers? Did something happen, for instance, when I got cut off? Did something happen when I was first driving that someone cut me off and it was a panic situation? Is it that I had gotten in an accident? You know, what are the things that are the triggers or the hot buttons? Another thing to consider is what happens when we push someone else's buttons, and what is the impact? These are just food for thought, because I really do want to dive into the traps. And again, what I mean by traps is we get triggered by an event. And the trap is what happens to us that we lose our sense of empowerment. In other words, if the 2-year-old is throwing a tantrum, I would like to be able to handle that tantrum with empathy and grace and, you know, not immediately go to a spanking or, you know, not lose it in Target. That's the trap. We get in this mindset that is, my kid is bad, or I'm a terrible parent, or everyone's going to judge me. And that trap keeps us from operating in that frontal lobe of the brain, which is the logic, and the behaviors aspect. So what we're going to do now is break you out into breakout rooms, and you're going to have 5 minutes. In your breakout rooms, I'd like for you to find at least one common trigger. So go around the room, list some triggers that you think may be common, and then I'd like for you to think about what is the actual trap you're in. So for instance, if it's a sales conversation, one person may say, the trap that I fall into is feeling like a horrible person for charging money for my services. Yet the trap that someone else might fall into in that example is, I have to accommodate, and I'm a service, I'm a servant, a person of service, and so I need to discount. So I just start discounting immediately. So you can see those are two different traps that people fall into. One might just shrink into nothing, feeling like, oh, I'm a terrible person or something, and the other person immediately falls into the trap of discounting. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to break out into breakout rooms. We'll spend 5 minutes first identifying, in that 5 minutes, you'll identify a common trigger, and then you'll discuss some traps that you fall in, and then we'll do a short debrief when we come back. So you'll have 5 minutes. I look forward to you guys coming back in and sharing. Awesome. All right, so I would love to hear just one or two people share what was the trigger, and then what were some ideas for the traps that you all fell into.
Kim, it's Vicki. Nana and I were talking about how we had some common threads between ours, and when someone either interrupts us when we're talking or is clearly not listening or just disregards what we're saying, and kind of bulldozes over us, I think it all comes back to a feeling or a dislike of feeling just literally disregarded, and sometimes, it's not even an aggressive thing. It's more of a passive thing the other person's doing. And sometimes that's even more infuriating when someone just kind of passes you over, and, I was thinking about it while she and I were talking. I don't know that a man would list that as one of their common triggers. I wonder if that's more of a typical female trigger, that we feel more disregarded in general. But she and I could have gone on all day. We came up with quite a few.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Vicki. The trap, it sounds like, is getting into that feeling of being disregarded. And I think that, to your question or your thought that perhaps men don't experience it, the traps that they may fall into, instead of it being, I'm feeling disregarded, could be that person's a jerk, right? And this is where the idea of a trigger and a trap is very different, because the response to the trap is what's going to be different. If the experience is someone interrupts, the trap is that person's a jerk, my response to that may be to disregard them. My response to someone being a jerk may be to call them out on it. Hey, you're being a jerk. Whereas if the response or the trap is, I'm feeling disregarded, that could generate a feeling of withdrawing or a behavior of withdrawing. It could generate a behavior of, just a host of different ones that look very different than the trap of. And this is where we're talking about mindset. We're talking about what is your mindset, and then how do you shift it? Because ultimately, if when someone interrupts us and we're not feeling heard, what we actually want on the other side of that is we want to feel heard. So what can we do to not get stuck in that trap and take that step to feeling heard? Do we repeat ourselves? Do we say, hey, I'm not feeling heard? What are the steps? And that's where it's so powerful to, first of all, understand that you're going to be triggered, but more importantly, what is the trap that you fall into? And so I would love to hear just one more person. Thank you, Vicki, for sharing.
Well, Miss Donna got us started on a really good one in our group in regards to authority and listening to authority, and having this conversation about who put you in charge.
Who died and made you king?
And it was just a really good conversation about where this is actually coming from, which of course, could stem from childhood as far as being told what to do all the time, nonstop. But also, Ms. Donna, I think you alluded to too, how you personally dealt with it was making sure that you were always the boss, I think, and especially in an entrepreneurial way.
I
think
love
I'm not
that.
the only one that has chosen to be an entrepreneur for reasons like that.
Yes, Donna, I was just talking with one of my best friends and saying, I think I'm a terrible employee because I just am too brazen and I will just call things out when they don't seem right. And it's not that I don't have a filter, I do, but it thinks that this needs to be said and you people are doing things dumb. And, so being an entrepreneur is definitely, or at least a consultant is definitely because of that. Yeah, thank you, Chris, for sharing, and Donna. So, as we move forward and we come up with strategies to navigate this, we really want to think about what is our current way of managing those traps when we get into them. How do we allow the trap to manifest itself and replay itself, and then how does that drive our behaviors, versus being very mindful and saying, I am in the trap, and instead of doing the same thing to get out of the trap, I'm going to choose to do something different. And that's what we're talking about when we're speaking to emotional intelligence. Because for me personally, it is something that I work on and have to work on every day of my life, because I am a very expressive human being. And my husband is not expressive at all. So opposites attract. And we had a conversation once where I said, you never are bothered by things. And he said, you don't get to say that I'm not bothered. You're emotional and expressive, and I'm not. I can still be bothered. I'm just not emotional. And he's like, so don't expect me to be you. So he had this argument with me for years, or this rebuttal to anything that I said about his expressiveness. And it was the whole, don't ask me to be you, blah, blah, blah. Finally, after, 12 years of marriage, I finally turned it back around on him, and I said, and don't expect me to be you. I am going to be expressive. That's the beauty of being married. We both get to put up with each other's nonsense for the rest of our lives and deal with it. So, so recognizing how you're currently managing that so you can be empowered to do things differently. And the other thing is, when you're trapped, you really want to think about, how is it impacting your relationships? How is, when you get down into that trap, when you get down into the feeling disregarded, how does the way you handle that impact your relationships, whether that's at work or at home? And, breaking news here, you are the same person, even at work and at home. So if things are bothering you about feeling disregarded at work, chances are you have those feelings at home too. And as a matter of fact, if you feel it in one space, you're probably going to be more sensitive in the other space. Because if you're feeling disregarded, you're going to be on the lookout for ways in which people are disregarding you. So it's really important to do that connecting of the dots of what are the traps that you fall in, and then how is that impacting your relationships, as well as how is that impacting you truly designing and getting the life that you love, including relationships, including your business, etc. So we are going to break out now into just two groups. And we're going to be talking about the highs and the lows. And specifically, when I am talking about the high, when you are in a sense of empowerment, when you are feeling like you are on your A game and you are just feeling like you are on fire, the world cannot stop you, no one can stop you, to the point that the 2-year-old having a tantrum is not an issue because you totally got this. To the point that you are in that sales meeting and someone asks you before you even introduce yourself, so what is this going to cost? You're like, I got this. I totally can handle this. So the question is, and what I'd like for you to talk about in the breakout room is, what causes you to be in that high? What causes you to feel like you're completely on your A game? What's happening around you that causes that, such that the triggers don't cause you to get into traps? Then on the flip side of that, what are the things that cause you to, they're not things that you control, it's outside of your control, but that can put you into that low space. So an example is, I may feel like I'm on top of the world, I feel like I'm in control and all of that, and then COVID hits, and now I feel like I have control over nothing. Okay, that's obviously an extreme example. But what are some of those things that causes you to be in that low? If we take the 2-year-old as an example, as a mom, many of us, and I certainly, if my daughter started going down a spiral, I had such empathy, and Mama Bear came out. I wanted to protect her. I want to fix her problems. And so even though I can be on my A game, I know that if anything involving my daughter, and especially her not managing her emotions, then I'm off my A game. Oh my gosh, well, welcome back, everybody. How was that breakout for you all?
Really good.
Good, awesome.
Yeah, very good.
I would love to hear from each room, just one share about what are the things that cause you to be on the high, and then what are some things that can cause you to be on that low end. So just one person from each room.
There was an interesting thing that was expressed, and that is when she gets ready or anticipates entering a room with new clients, there's anxiety. Maybe anxiety is too strong a word, but sort of hesitation. Once she gets in there, she feels she's got it all handled. And when she is finished, she's exhilarated. And I think that's fabulous. First of all, to even recognize, because I think triggers can be positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
But rather than a trap, we need another name other than trap.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Donna. And that's why I love for people to be empowered to not let it be a trap, to make those choices. And like you said, and a lot of public speakers find this as well. They actually get a sense of anxiousness before public speaking. And probably if you ask them early on in their careers, they probably called it nervousness. I'm nervous to get on stage. And then over time, they shift it to, I'm anxious to get on stage. I'm excited to get on stage. The feeling is the same, but yet they shift it in their mind, and they no longer get into a trap of, oh, I can't do this. Oh, it's going to, stink. People are not going to like me, to, this is my opportunity to have, to influence thousands of people. And that's that shift that we want you all to make, is from feeling like I'm triggered, I'm going to immediately go into that trap, to I'm triggered and I'm empowered to make different choices, and I'm empowered to turn this into something very positive for myself. So thank you.
How about the word opportunity? Doesn't start with a T, no alliteration, but that's what I hear you say. The trigger, then you have an opportunity because of the trigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so someone from the other room, what were some things that you discussed?
Vicki, you want to go?
Sure. We were talking about kind of coming up with a preparation Because when we're in that high mode, we're rested, we're calm, maybe we're even prepared to deal with something, a trigger. Maybe we know we're going into a situation that will trigger us. But other times, you know, life just comes at you and you're not prepared, you're tired, you're easily, you know, upset. And so we were talking about trying to prepare in advance by having just like a simple comeback that we have thought about intentionally and memorized that we can do. And we were talking about like when you feel disregarded or interrupted, that to come from a place of kind of like a quiet strength, not a combativeness, and definitely not an apologetic, oh, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear, you didn't hear me. No. Just saying, I don't think you heard me. And then repeating what you said, or let me be more clear. And let me be clear, and then repeating again what you said, or maybe rephrasing it, but having that message that is calmly delivered but catches their attention, to make a point that you're not feeling heard, you know, without saying I don't feel heard. Because I can see a lot of men folk in particular, just to pick on the men again, you know, imagine they're going to feel like they're having a conversation with their wife, and the last thing someone wants at work is to feel like they're having a conversation with their wife. I don't feel heard, right? So yeah, some of that is what we talked about.
Awesome, love that. And one of the things that I in particular love was a perfect segue to a comment that I have, which is being prepared really starts so deep within you. And the way that I like to look at it is I can be on my A game if I am well rested, if I have food in my belly, in other words, I'm not hungry and distracted by that, if I have exercise so I don't have any pent up physical tension, if I have, you know, gone through my morning routine, which gets me very grounded, I do some Bible study, some journaling, etc. So there are ways to get yourself in that state of high that I encourage you all to consider. What is it that makes you feel like you're on your A game? Is it eating healthy? Is it exercise? Is it sleep? And oh, by the way, the answer is yes to all of those things, because that's how human beings function best, is when they have all those things. So that we can elevate, and those of you who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of, and I'm totally losing it right
of needs.
But anyway, of needs, that's what it is. You know, the foundational is you have to have food and water, then you have to have shelter and safety, and then you can move into those higher levels in which you are working at levels of empowerment, working at levels of fulfillment, etc. So again, we're still animals and we still have to have those basic needs met. So those basic needs for all of us is sleep, food, water, you know, and to feel good about ourselves, exercise, to physically feel good. So that is one thing that I will encourage each of you to figure out, is what does it take for you to set yourself up so that you're in that high state, so that you're less impacted by the triggers. Again, the triggers are going to happen. The question is, how do you respond to those? So let's go ahead and...
The word for that these days is self-care.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive into some tools. And the first tool that I'm going to tell you about is mindfulness. And what you want to do is define for yourself, what does mindfulness look like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? You want to write out your definition for what mindfulness looks like. And one definition that people have is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Now, the key phrase here for most people is the non-judgmentally. In other words, without judgment. So I can sit in a room with two people who are arguing, and if I'm mindful, I am an observer. I'm not getting triggered. by the arguing, I'm able to maintain a mindful state so that I can understand what's happening, hear the conversation that's happening, etc. And I'm not judging, because the minute you step into judgment, you are in a space of thinking and not in a space of strategizing. You're just kind of thinking and being triggered again. So let's take just 30 seconds, and I'm going to set my timer right here for us. Take 30 seconds to just observe what's happening right now in your space or on this Zoom. And all we're going to do is be observers. We're not going to judge. We're just going to observe. Okay? And before we do that, I'd like for you just to take note of what's your current state. Are you anxious? Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling excited? What's your current state? And we're going to sit in an observation mode for 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and get started now. And pause. So when you're in that state of observation, if you're truly taking the information in without judgment, it can be very calming and get you grounded. So just by typing in the chat, if the mindfulness, just being in observer mode, type yes in the chat if that helped you feel grounded. And if it didn't, you can type no in the chat. Okay, so in the chat, we had lots of yeses. So this is a tool that you can use. And I'd like for you to take that tool. Is just, if you call it mindfulness, you can call it being in observation mode, you can call it whatever you want. But this is really a great tool to help you get grounded when you're triggered. When you're in the meeting and people are asking, questions to each other, and you can just truly observe what's happening, that's great. Now, if people are firing things at you, it's a little harder to just sit and pause and just observe without responding. So, but certainly when your, 2-year-old is having a situation, if you shift into observation mode without judgment, again, it's not, I'm a bad parent. It's not, they're a psychopath. It's just, wow, look at them throwing the tantrum. Look at them rolling on the floor. Interesting, Easier said than done with a 2-year-old. But I have to tell you that I did have experiences where adults were throwing temper tantrums like that, literally throwing temper tantrums. And I stepped into observation mode thinking, this is fascinating. Look at this grown human being, like throwing a temper tantrum. Is very interesting. But all right, next tool. Oh, what's happening here? Next tool is breathing. And this exercise is one that many people have. And this is the way that I like to do it. Is you breathe in for 3 seconds, you hold it for 3 seconds, and you exhale for 3 seconds. So let's just try this one time. I'll say on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in, 2, 3. Hold, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3. This tool is very simple. It is something that you can do even if you're engaging with someone. If someone asks you a question, you can just breathe. It takes 9 seconds. They won't notice it, You could even shorten it to 2 seconds. The intent is when you breathe, you literally are grounding yourself to your body. You're allowing your body to take note of what's happening in your body. Some people do inhale 3 seconds, hold 3 seconds, exhale 3 seconds, hold 3 seconds. Some people do 5 seconds. I just really think it's important to breathe, and breathing in a specific pattern. So you decide what that pattern is for you. I like the 3 seconds because I can do that breathing exercise even in an argument or in a situation that may be triggering. I can do that. 9 seconds, people don't even notice. Another thought or another tool is physical engagement with something. Okay, so I have colleagues who have like a little rock about this size that they just keep in their pocket. And when there's a triggering event, they'll grab onto that rock and they'll just physically engage with it. There was a person that I spoke with that when they needed to feel grounded to themselves, they would just twirl their wedding ring, because that wedding ring represents that safest space that they're in, which is with their spouse. So you can do anything to engage physically. It could be holding your pen and just taking notice of what it feels like to have the pen in your hand. Again, these are things that don't take any time. Most people are not going to notice. I mean, unless you're, doing something weird with the rock, like petting it or, something like that. But, if you make it something that can be subtle, that physical engagement, again, reconnects you to your body. Be mindful, especially if you get triggered, that the physical engagement isn't awkward or obvious to others that makes them engage with you differently. So an example is if you're a speaker and you start wringing your hands as you're speaking, that could be a distraction. So do what you can to make it, again, a physical engagement and yet not obvious. All right. So it is 9:30. I would love to hear 1 or 2 takeaways from today so that we can wrap up.
Kim, I'll share just your comment about how you and your husband don't expect me to be you, because that applies specifically to one of my triggers, which is when my husband is driving, and I just cannot get over he's slower. It's just he may not take the most efficient route, and it's me trying to be the fastest, most efficient, do it all, and that again applying me to him is not appropriate. And so I appreciated that, because I think I can say, yeah, why would I expect me and my sense of urgency? Because not a lot of people share that same with me. And why would I put that on him in such a benign situation when he gets so irritated that I bring it up? So I just need to stop. So anyway, thank you for that, because that one was really good.
You're welcome, Melanie. And I love that you identified the trigger, the slow driving. You identified this trap of urgency and judgment and all that, and now you have a strategy that can keep you from getting in that trap. Love it. So it is 9:31. I would love to hear more shares. So if there is anyone that wants to hang on for a minute and share takeaways, I would love it. But certainly in honoring everyone else's time, if you need to jump off, go ahead and jump off.
I have more of a question, Kim. I love the using breath for mindfulness. And yeah. I think when I need it the most is when someone says something to me and I need to pause before I respond. But if they say something and it's obvious that I'm doing a deep breath, I don't know if it could almost put them off more, if there's a way that I can do it. I was trying to actually practice just now doing it quietly, just
use a water bottle or have a glass of water. No one will ever question you grabbing a sip of water or something like that. And that should give you just long enough to pause. Especially if you're in a meeting, if you can always have some water or a coffee or something that will give you that opportunity, because no one will ever question that you're oh, hold on, I need a.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's to give you.
Melanie, that's genius.
That is
Hey,
great.
Kim probably taught me that, honestly, or somebody along the way, because that is, it wasn't my, but that was, we learned that, and it really was helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Or even just if
Yeah,
I
the other-
said like, and then like to let them know I heard them. I'm not ignoring them. Because can you imagine if you talked to someone and they were dead silent and then went, you're think, oh my God, who knows what's going to come out of their mouth after they do this? Like a volcano's about to erupt, right? When actually that person is calming themselves. So yeah,
You may be surprised. I don't know, Kim, like you said, that kind of pausing for a few seconds, you may not even notice it.
Good.
Yeah. And the other thing too, and again, when we're talking about empowerment, and this is different than manipulation, okay? Very different than manipulation. But if there is a heated interaction and you need it to pause, sometimes silence actually is a tool that can be used so that it doesn't continue to escalate. So that breath is a change in behavior on your side, which is going to cause them to change their behavior as well. So that in and of itself could be a tool. The water, absolutely use that. Another thing is to just say, let me think about that for a second. And you can, again, that's communicating them that you're taking time to process, or even let me process that, or, there's 1,000 different things that you could say. As someone who has clients, men and women, that desperately need to find their empowerment and exercise it, I encourage you to find the thing that is going to help you feel that sense of empowerment. If it is about, hold on, let me think about that. If it is taking the water, whatever tool is going to work for you. And then hopefully over time, depending on who you're engaging with, even making that direct request of, let me just take a moment. That is ideally where people would be, in my opinion. Ideally, people would be able to ask for what they need in the moment and it be fine. So something to strive for that we all work on and strive for. How does that help, Vicki?
Very much, yes. In fact, so since my husband and I are working from home alone today, because the kids are actually in school for one day, we'll have some practice. I'm sure an opportunity will arise.
Yes.
That's the way to
love
play
it
immediately.
Yes. Anyone else like to share?
Donna just put in the chat, great start to my week. I agree. This was, it also sounds like this felt like a therapy session, which is much needed.
I agree. Kim is the best. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you sticking with it. We didn't get a chance actually for everyone to brainstorm some new ways of engaging. There was just too much fun happening. So I encourage you to do that. Certainly reach out to me if you have any additional questions or if you want some ideas or to brainstorm with me. I would love to do that. My email is kim@kimlmiles.com. And let me just send that in the chat here. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to brainstorm, happy to share. And I will get these slides put together and sent out. And I'll probably just go ahead and send them to Kate, and then you can send them to the participants. Does that work?
Yes, we'll get it all posted. And if you need to, we've recorded the session as we do with all of our live sessions. So if you missed anything or just want to go through the exercise again, want to go through it with your spouse or your business partner, something like that, that would be a great way to do that. Just either by later today or tomorrow, we'll have it up on Rise TV. Thank you, Kim, so much. Thanks everyone for starting your day with us. This is great.
Thank you, ladies. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.